many of the data assets available through things like wildfire.gov and the NIFC Open Data site. And one of those information assets, whether you like it or not, is the historical ICS 209 reporting archive. And I say like it or not because, as I think it was John Noneman yesterday, he noted that 209s are a communication tool, and they're largely intended for, tactical decision making and situational awareness. They're full of subjective information and they're error prone. But they are, as far as I know, the primary source of information from response teams about the daily goings on during large or otherwise significant wildfires or other, events, incidents in the U.S. And, sure, we can see stuff from space, and we're doing a better job than ever about getting geospatial information about resource use and daily fire progression. But, what if somebody from this administration or from the media or for the general public or your grandmother wants to know the story of, say, like the 2020 August complex in Northern California, right? There are many places to go for data to fully flesh that out, tell that story, but I can't imagine that the 209s would not be, included as a resource to do that. And if you do go to the 209s, using the data that are publicly available and archived on wildfire.gov, again, that's our Wildland Fire Application Information Portal. You could just search for August complex and get all the daily reporting from that information or from that system, right? and it would square well with things like the final fire report information in Inform, right? Well, no, not so much. First off, complexes are a headache for a lot of reasons, and y'all know that. But if you want the story of the August complex from the 209s, and this isn't just complex, but you're gonna have to know things like beyond the fact that there were upward of 35 ignitions associated with that overall incident, that there were daily reports for several components, aspects or parts, pieces of the complex before it actually became just the August complex for reporting purposes, which, as I personally know, because I was part of this, really didn't happen until Area Command took over, right? And so, I mean, we can't kid ourselves that, the 209s are, they're an information resource. And what I'm going to do today is hand this over to my colleague, Lise St. Dennis, and I believe Max Cook is going to help us talk about what we've done as a team to, make these data, warts and all, potentially useful for some sorts of analyses. Because again, you might hate the idea that R&D or anybody wants to use these data, to try to say something about, what's happened on fires, because they're not completely objective. What we've done is tried to get us closer to being able to have a refined version of those raw data that are already publicly available and can be grabbed by anyone. So, Lise, I see you on the screen. I'm going to turn this over to you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you, Karen, for the introduction. Are you looking, see, do you see just my slide, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, without my notes. Thank you, Karen, for doing that introduction. You made this easy on me because I can skip some of the stuff I was going to have to delve into. Today I'm going to be talking about the ICS 209 Plus dataset, and in particular, I'm going to focus on version 3.0 that we're working on moving into production and publishing, hopefully this summer or early fall. This is the third version of the data set that we've released, and this one I think has a number of enhancements that I want to really focus on in this talk. And I also want to emphasize that the data set and all of the code used to produce this are open source and publicly available. The first two versions were published of the manuscript were published on Nature Scientific Data, which is where we anticipate the next release going to as well. So thank you, Karen, for talking about this, so I can kind of skip some of this. But I wanted to really emphasize that we fully recognize that the ICS 209 was not intended for research purposes, and it has a lot of pitfalls and caveats. But the production of the ICS 209 Plus dataset is our efforts to clean and refine this and link it to other sources that make it a useful tool for research use. And also I wanted to, before I dive in, acknowledge that producing this data set is a significant amount of effort. And in this release and other releases, it's taken a team. So I want to acknowledge my co-contributors here. So Karen and I, working on the data set, put a lot of effort into cleaning and refining the records themselves and taking advantage of the data that's there. In the last release and in this release, we also collaborated with Katie McConnell from UBC, where she's a social scientist, and she took the data that we had and aggregated it spatially at the county, block group, and tract level, and made it easy to use for social scientists like herself. And so that was part of the last release and will be part of the next release. And then Max Cook, who in the last release was a PhD student, now he's finished. And he worked on connecting daily burn perimeters through the fired product to the ICS 209 records. And he's going to talk about that a little bit shortly. And then new for this release, in work that we've done recently, it's been really clear to us how important the IMSR data set, it's going to be talked about tomorrow, how important that was for our analysis using the 209 data. And so in the upcoming release, Jung, Win, and Aaron are going to help us fold that in and co-publish it. And then finally, Aaron, I also work really closely with, and we worked in collaboration on taking the resources table and producing something that could be used for analysis as well. So just to give you some background, we published the first version of the data set in 2020, and this gives you a very high-level overview. And our main goal in this first release was to be able to clean and align the 3 different versions published in separate databases to match up with the current version that was implemented in 2014. So we ended up having to truncate the data set in 2014 because there were some significant data issues from 2015 to 2017 that we were not able to resolve in a timely manner. And this release is pretty simple. It includes 3 main tables. So the SITREPs are published as 2 files, one focused specifically on wildfire, and the second is an all hazards version. And then we took the data in the SITREPs, the daily SITREPs, and we synthesized that up into a wildfire incident summary. So in yellow, you can see the tables that we've cleaned and refined that are part of the data set, and then what we produced in addition. And then we also, as part of that initial release, we connected to Karen's fire occurrence database, which gives us access to the final reporting information. And we also connect to MTBS as well, which gives us fire perimeters. The second version of the data set was published in 2023. We were able to fix all of the critical issues in the 2015 to 2017 records. Found some new and interesting ones moving past that, actually. And we were also able to take advantage of some of the additional tables in the current version. So we added information in about suppression strategies and casualty, injury, and illness. And then you can see we still have the wildfire incident summary table, but we also added a wildfire complex summary, which is an aggregation of information about complexes coming from the SITREPs, from the complex associations table, and then also from the FOD. And so it provides this this more concise view of what's happening across those, the complexes and their member fires, which was new. And then, as I mentioned in the last release, Katie McConnell added the spatial version. And then what we're working on now, so we've made some really significant enhancements in the new version. And I'm going to speak about each of these in more detail, but I want to highlight them. So on the left, you can see what the basic overview of the wildfire is, and data set and related tables. And then on the right, we also add some enhancements for all hazards to make it more consistent with the rest of the data. A couple of the key things that we added to the current release is an incident reference table that's derived from the incidents table, and I'll talk about that a little more. We also cleaned and refined the complex association's daily reporting, and resolved some issues that make it much more possible to analyze complexes in the complex incident summaries. I'm going to talk about that in detail. We added a new resources table, and then also folding in the IMSR data set. So as Karen mentioned, before I dive into each of these pieces, we do quite a bit of information or quite a bit of work to fill missing values, to smooth things. So for instance, reporting of estimated costs. There's a lot of incidents when numbers get really, really large where extra zeros or not enough zeros are put in there. So we do work to smooth that out, amongst other things. We also have done work to create new fields that aren't in there. So things like the cessation date can tell you when the fire is near it's within 95% of its final size based on the acreage. And then, deriving things like the first reported containment date. We also, in this release, it's a significant improvement in terms of cleaning and deduplicating the data. And this time around, we use the Irwin ID to help, and some of the information in the complexes to help us figure out where some cleaning and refinement was needed. And then finally, this version, we've done a lot of work to make sure that we have everything synced up between the tables and eliminate irrelevant information or noise. Okay, so diving into this new incident reference table. So it's based on the incidents table that's there, which contains the Irwin identifier, which is an important field for connecting to other systems. So we took the table and cleaned and refined it, expanding all the reference and categorical variables. We also linked this to the FOD final fire reporting and the FOD ID, to MTBS and to FIRED and its related statistics. And so the incidents table is the reference to go to for any member fire in the complex associations or in the daily sit reps. And having all of that in one place seems to make a lot of sense. It's one place to clean and maintain it and then join it into the other tables. And then moving to something that I think is a really significant enhancement is that complexes are incredibly inherently messy and complex, very aptly named. So the picture on the right is from 2015, showing the flow of individual fires across different fire complexes. Which is something that can happen frequently when resources are scarce and things need to be adapted on the fly. But that sort of shifting around makes it very, very complicated to be able to look at what's happening across a complex and throughout the life of a fire. And so in the last release, Karen and I came up with the solution because we didn't have time to really solve the problem. So we put a member fire in the fire where its final home was, essentially, and then curated it from there. And we did compile information across each of the information sources we had, but on that implementation, it was really a fundamentally manual process. So not ideal. So then in version 3.0, when we were trying to figure out how to manage it, we came up with this concept of an incident grouping that allows us to keep track of clusters of related complex events or theaters where it's a complex of complexes while still maintaining the relationships more effectively. So using the example from the drawing above, this is just a couple of examples to show you how we implemented it. So there were 5 complexes that had a tight association with one another. And we grouped those as Clearwater Municipal Motorway North Complex. And you can, as an incident grouping, and you can see that they're all fairly related. And for example, the Kamaya Gulch fire started out in Lawyer Complex and then shifted into Clearwater Municipal. And so it's reported under both of those, but under the incident group, the main incident grouping as well. And then there are 2 examples at the bottom, Cantaloupe and Big Stew, where for just a very brief period, it was under Motorway Complex, but we kept it under the Loxa South Complex. And this gives us a way to be able to analyze the data more efficiently. So then moving on, just to give you a sense for it. So the complex summary table has an incident group if there is one. If not, by default, it's just the complex name. And then there are for the complex, there are descriptors such as, its discovery date, its point of origin. Similarly, for the member fire, it has its point of origin and discovery date and other relevant fields. We link to the Irwin ID is linked in, the FOD ID is there, MTBS, and also fired. And then importantly, we use the final reporting in the FOD to give some additional, that's where we derive the point of origin, et cetera. So, and then that gives you a sense for complexes. And then we added this, we cleaned and added the complex associations daily reporting table to the next release. And it's pretty straightforward. We went through and pulled in all the related information for the complex and the member fire, and then expanded on all the standardized fields. Okay, so, and then one of the last significant changes in this release is that the resource utilizations table is huge and unwieldy. So before we implemented our changes, it's roughly between 1.3 and 1.4 million records, and it's not easy to draw information from it, in particular not across fires. So what we did to simplify it is we added an agency type categorization and a resource type categorization, in addition to it's a more general resource type category. So just really quickly, agency types, we split federal into USDA, which is Forest Service, Department of Interior, and other, and then we have state, county, and other levels or agency types, and other would be things like private or international. And then we took all of the assorted resource types, and we grouped them by a more general type. So aerial, cruise, engines, overhead, and other, and then all of the related personnel. And by doing that, we were able to take something that was huge and consolidate it down into just a few 100,000 rows in a much simpler format. And then finally, I mentioned we're folding in the IMSR data. This is just a plot from a study that I've been working on with Aaron, comparing public response across 2 wildfires. And it was really useful to be able to fold that in to see the relationship between resource strain and what was happening on the fire. And then finally, Fired is a product that we developed in our lab. I worked on the initial algorithm for it. It's derived from Modus. And then Max really picked it up and had worked on connecting that to the 209s. So I'm going to give Max a chance here to talk and share what we're doing in the next release. Max, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So thanks, Lise. And I'd also just like to say, like, this is just such a huge amount of work, and it's been a pleasure to watch this process unfold, making this data as useful as possible. As was mentioned at the outset, I'm a PhD student, or just defended my dissertation actually in the Department of Geography at CU Boulder. And my part in this project has really been focused on linking incident command reports with satellite-derived burn area detections. So this fired product that Lisa's mentioning, based on MODIS burned area, and it's kind of a constantly evolving project, but it delineates fires based on the MODIS burned area product, so we can get fires down to a pretty small 500 meter pixel size. And really, I think the point here is how can we leverage these reporting mechanisms, both at the incident level, but also at the daily level, to try and understand, the link between these satellite burned area products and what's being reported in these 209 reports. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here in terms of looking at both the spatial progression of fires as well as those daily incident reports. So as part of the last release, and we're trying to improve on this in the current release, we've identified or co-located incident command reporting with these fire perimeters. And what that gives us is then the ability to look at, again, daily progressions and a suite of other variables. And importantly, I think this join captures an important subset that's not captured in the MTBS join that comes with the FOD linkage. And again, that's partially because we're able to detect fires under that MTBS acre threshold. So 1,000 acres in the West, for instance. And for my research, I've been using this sort of joined product to look at the spatial patterns of housing risk, taking information from the 209s about resources and about values at risk, and combining that with these spatial maps of fire progressions to look at all sorts of factors: topography, vegetation, weather conditions, etc. And I think this really brings in a lot of opportunity. And I don't have a whole lot more on this, and I'll hand it back to Lise. But I think for the folks on this call, thinking about how to improve this 209 database through linking to other metrics. And so for my perspective, linking to satellite-based metrics of fire activity, I think really opens the door for some really interesting analyses looking at this. So happy to hear ideas or talk offline, but that's all I got here.
Thank you, Max. Just to wrap up, I would emphasize that we're working on this. The paint's still wet on this one. We still have a significant amount of cleaning and design work to do and cross-validation. But I think this is a really important step for this release to prep it. We're considering getting it into a solid state that we could consider reformatting it and prepping it for natural language analysis and ingestion into a large language model to see what else is possible here. So with that, I'm done, actually. So I'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts. Thank you so much.
Well, that's really exciting and impressive, and just really shows what we can do today with the data that we have. Like, we actually have a lot of information, and I've often thought that, prioritizing getting to the data that we actually have and understanding it is maybe more important than trying to add new data to it, right? So yeah. Just spending that, it just takes time, right, to view the data that we've collected in one format through a new lens and get it ready to do some of the type of stuff you're doing. So that's awesome. Super excited to hear what others think. There's some chats coming in, looks like. So when I get those, Karen.
Yeah, so it looks like Max and I both posted some of the URLs for the data. And then Lise, there was a question, can you expand a bit more about the connection to the IMSR? Didn't follow the connection you showed in one slide.
Sure. So the IMSR dataset, there's a presentation tomorrow on that. And it gives it, there's a, June Wynn has done made some efforts to connect national preparedness level to the actual prioritization and the individual fires. And so we want to look at making that connection physically within our data set, so that we can start to look at how things were prioritized and when, and what was the preparedness level on those days when certain things are occurring. Does that answer your question?
And I might just expand a little bit. The actual connection will be through the incidents that are named in the IMSR, right? Because we're scraping the PDFs, the historical PDFs. And of course, we have lists of large fires that, you would think that they would be named the same thing in the 209s, right? Well, they're not. So we actually have to go through there, just like we have to link the 209s to the FOD through some gymnastics and figure out which fires we're talking about, and make sure that, if you've got a list of the incidents that were prioritized on a given day, give me the same ID in the 209 plus data set, which links to the FOD. So the connection is through the incidents.
So are you capturing prioritization directly from the IMSR scraping?
You cut out a little bit. What did you?
Can you repeat that?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I see the question.
Yeah.
Patrick put it in the chat. Are you capturing the prioritization from the IMSR web scrape? Yes. And again, more details are going to be in Erin's presentation tomorrow. But yes, all the PDFs that you can go and pull down for a given day, we've scraped that.
Jennifer?
Hi, are you aware that we've compiled the IMSR data from 2002 to last year
Yeah, that's
in
actually
a one data set?
Yes, and that's actually what we're folding in. We're not redoing that effort. That's why we're
Right.
involving the people who produced it in our next release, so that we can fold their work into our work. So we're co-publishing it.
No, I mean, are you aware that it's compiled into one full data set at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
great,
and Steve Larrabee will be talking. So tomorrow, Erin Belville will be talking about this historical things that we've been scraping, and then Steve will be talking about the data that are publicly, viewable through the new application, if that's what you were getting at, Jennifer, right? So moving forward, there are things that are that have been developed to make that more public facing and easily accessible. We'll see a lot of that, more details about that tomorrow. But again, looking back in time before we had that viewer, we still want to be able to, have that information about prioritization and overall resource levels and things like that from the IMSRs. Historically, we want to not lose that.
Okay, sounds like there's more to be discussed on presentations tomorrow. So we're gonna move on. Thank you, Karen, Lise. And we're gonna go to IROC. Elise, Julie, you on?
Hi, let me get the presentation up.
Please, can you go ahead and stop sharing? Thank you.
Let me try that again. And I won't turn on my camera. I'll have the best internet. Can you guys see?
Nothing yet.
Does she have to be a presenter to share?
She should.
She should be able to, or?
I'm getting only meeting organizers and presenters can share this meeting.
Okay, let me pump you up. Where are you?
Yeah, I don't have even the share thing.
Can you raise your hand so I can find you?
And while you're trying to get me hooked up there, I'll just say, yeah, thanks for the post-traumatic stress rehash of the 2015 mess in the Nez Claire. I did live that as the Intel coordinator at Northern Rockies back in those days, and well, integration is a good thing back in those days. A lot of people didn't understand what happened in one system would update other systems, and when you create a bunch of groups of fires one day and then change them to a different group of fires another day and woofed us, it has downstream effects to 209 program. So those were fun days.
It's like an iconic image though, Julie, of the complexity of complexes.
And I do know who created that one. That lovely spaghetti chart.
All right, we're seeing it.
All right. Let me move some screens around on my page. Anyways, good afternoon, everybody. Julie Plutnik here. I'm the IROC business lead. I also wear the business lead hat for Forest Service side of Wildcat. And I'm going to tag team with Elise throughout the presentation.
And we tag team Wildcat as well. So yeah, and Elise Hall's project manager for IROC and Wildcat E for the Forest Service. Go ahead, Jules. All right, to start, we'll get some IROC basics out of the way. We awarded a 7-year POP for the follow-on IROC contract that started in June of 2024, and that will go through 2031. That's a capacity-based contract, so it gives us a little bit of flexibility on scaling up or scaling down quickly. And in the upcoming slides, we'll kind of show you how we did some of that. And then just some stats. We support 285 dispatch centers nationally. Last year, we had 13,000 active users. A lot of times in IROC, we think of dispatchers, but that also includes IMT members, overhead resources, and vendors for some of that self-statusing. We'll probably see a little increase this year with the addition of iClip.
Okay, I'll just review a little bit of our accomplishments from 2024. Obviously a lot of system enhancements. Let's go live. Fixing some parent travel enhancements for our subordinate support requests, following along with their parent requests. Implemented associated support requests disposition modal for dispatchers to keep track of support requests better. We got rid of staged incidents. This concept came over from Legacy Land Ross, that we used to bring in incidents from Irwin and stage them within the system, and then dispatchers would promote them when they needed to actually do resource ordering on them. Since the IROC go live, there's a lot of duplicates created in the world, thanks to people not promoting their staged incidents. So we got rid of it. So try to mitigate some of that duplication of incidents in the integrated environment. Every year we do a service now platform upgrade. Last year we went to Vancouver. I'll talk about this year shortly. We did our Irwin V9 work. A biggie that Elise and Ivy worked on with our CIO security folks, getting our session timeout extended up to 2 hours. Being a high value asset, that was a lot of work to get that done. Benefits the dispatchers. They're busy bouncing between different applications and not always in there, but getting 2 hours at least helps the dispatch community not being timed out all the time. We have annual Viper updates and enhancements we're usually working on. added some additional capability for users with read-only, IMT ordering manager and IMT roster manager, being able to view data lists and reports and dashboards in the system. So dispatchers weren't giving them dispatch manager and dispatcher access and roles that they shouldn't be doing and access to things they shouldn't be seeing. Made some nested roster enhancements, continual Irwin integration, import, export fixes. We're looking really darn good there. Trying to get everything into Irwin that needs to be, because obviously it does feed a lot of other applications downstream. If anybody didn't know, in IROC, we can add attachments to requests and we can do multiple at a time. Again, to help out dispatchers, we added messaging for mismatched travel. So the resource orders aren't having overlapping travel and fixing that. You can't be in two places at the same time. Fix some preposition stuff, making sure we don't lose resources when they go out to incidents and come back to their pre-pose. Had some release and future refinement, just when you're releasing resources in the future that the requests are going to complete at the time they actually get released, not the time they were getting the request was getting released. Other big ones, we did some improvements to performance, creating new request page or travel modals with processing times. Found some bugs in there that speeded things up for dispatchers. CAD log updates, that's a continual thing. And yearly too, can't wait for that to become part of Edge or in Irwin and somebody else manage that other than me. Numerous CCB requests, bug fixes, system enhancements. That's an ongoing thing throughout the year. Lots of data cleanup, never ending. I do wear that hat and have some great SMEs that help us align the data within the system and to Irwin and poke the dispatch centers to fix their resources. As Elise mentioned, follow-on contract was awarded. March 13th, IROC turned 5. So that was a good milestone. Our plan for 2025, some things that have already gotten done this year, did do away with fill with override. Basically, that was functionality. Again, that came over from legacy system that dispatchers used to be able to, if a resource didn't have a qual, like they're a division soup, but they want to go out as a task force leader, but they don't have the qual in the system, they could do a fill with override, add the resource to the request, or they're a trainee in the system, but technically they're qualified and it just hasn't been updated in the qual systems. That came to light in integration testing last year, that we had that functionality in the system and heard from the qual systems that we shouldn't be doing that. Only resources with the quals that they have in the system should be filling requests. So we did away with that little workaround in the system that had been around forever. Transferring incidents, Kara talked about that a little bit this morning on the Wildcat section. Technically, IROC's been able to transfer incidents, non-CAD incidents, since go live. So that includes anything that's come in from fire code 209. We've been able to transfer those, just found some bugs last year. Actually, at least being in a Boise dispatch and us transferring an incident from Nick to Boise, we found some bugs with it. So fix some things there, internal to the system. But with the CADs, Wildcat being able to transfer incidents, we're reading in that transfer information now. So as the other CADs come online with transfer incidents, we shouldn't see any issues with that within IROC, as well as any requests on those incidents coming over into the new center appropriately. We added the new event kinds, the foreign incident, international mobilization. I actually think those are very good ones that we added to the system, having been asked from Washington office, better way of tracking what resources are coming in from Canada on compacts, what's going from compacts up into either or back and forth United States, Canada, better tracking of things that aren't necessarily going through the CFC-NIFC agreement. So better tracking there. Again, we did the ServiceNow platform upgrade to Xanadu this year. And if anybody knows the Olivia Newton-John movie, raise your hand. Or request managing dispatch. That's a new functionality coming to the community. Still have about another month, I guess, maybe to work on that one between finishing coding and testing everything through. But request managing dispatch will be one center as the managing for the incident, but say they give their neighboring dispatch request managing access, so the neighboring expanded dispatch can handle the ordering for them. So rather than transferring the full incident, basically they're giving their neighbor access to their incident to manage the ordering for them. So I think that one will be a big benefit to the community down the line, rather than the just transferring an incident when it doesn't need to be. CAL FIRE QMS, their qual management system. They're coming online next week. First couple centers coming online. So right now, CAL FIRE responders use IROC as their system of record for their overhead. So the qual management system, those resources will start coming in through an appropriate qual system. Help mitigate duplicates and some of the responders having the same qual multiple times. ICLIP, the Interagency Cash Logistics Inventory Program. That's a mouthful to say. Lisa's going to talk about it here in another slide or two, but that one's coming online May 20th. The National Emergency Rental Vehicle NERV tool added to the program, coming online May 28th. And nationally contracted resources, the cruise portion of that coming online next week, April 17th. So more to come on those in a couple slides, as well as data archiving and data footprint management. We're using a lot of space in the system now, and data will slow down. So we're figuring out ways to speed up the system and move the historical data and off the main current information, but so users can still access it for reporting needs. The POO State Financial Code integration, that's some follow-up from last year's V9 work. We are bringing in the POO State Financial Codes from CAD systems, anything that's coming in through Irwin. Finishing this up will be us, whatever POO State Financial Codes created in IROC goes back into Irwin. So finishing our portion of that. Pre-orders, that was part of the legacy system that are trying to get out there for the community this year. A buying team spreadsheet import. New thought concept for variable fills for porta potties. Continually looking for improvements for performance, speed issues. Our prior backlog CCB items, we probably have about 4 years worth of things to still work on, and haven't had a CCB for a little bit, so I'm sure there's more to add there. Our Viper and double IPA transition. So double IPA is the new Forest Service integration of incident procurement automation system. It's going to be replacing Viper. So they just received their funding. We'll be back into meetings with them for a transition to that going into 2026. And then the box that's been on my PowerPoints for a couple of years now, the OAS Unit ID integration with Edge or whatever that's going to be, 2025, 2026 to be determined. Yes, please. We would like one place for that info to come from. And looking at an updated user interface, user experience for 2026-ish, I'll say ish. Right now we have a portal side of IROC as well as a data management tool and multiple ways for dispatchers to look at things, create requests. And when it comes time for coding, we have multiple places to do things. And yeah, it does happen. We do miss places and have to go back and fix it. So looking for the futuring of it, trying to consolidate things into one platform. So we only have to update code one place, not multiple, and be more efficient for developer time, obviously money being spent on the project, and ease of use standardization for the dispatch community. Frequency catalog, integrated frequencies on the board for 2026. And I'll hand off to Elise. She can talk about roadmap.
All right, thanks, Jules. Yeah, so I wanted to just highlight all of the work we're kind of doing in parallel here. So this shows all of those new kind of scoped apps we're working on in parallel with our IROC proper, as we're calling it, application. So that includes our NERV, NCR, data management initiatives, as well as the iClip roadmap isn't on here because that's a whole beast in itself, but just kind of shows all that work we're doing. And then just to note, at the end of June, our plus up funding for some of those items will be going away for NERV and NCR, and that's why there's kind of that cutoff line there. And then just to note that that orange box kind of denotes fire season, where we try to limit our production releases, just so we're not affecting the dispatchers too much. In that typical Western fire season, there are outliers, we know, but we try to shut it down for that portion. Go to the next one. Thank you. This just is a slide noting all of our new module highlights, and I'll be going over all of these in the next few slides. Okay, so the first one is iClip, which is replacing ICBS. This is going to go live on May 20th. Some features of iClip will not be in the MVP, so work will need to continue at an accelerated development pace through phase 1 and 2 of that yellow to green bar up top. We'll continue working hard on that throughout the season. What does this bring for us? It's improved integration and user experience between IROC and the cache application. We're using out-of-the-box functionality for iClip, so IROC is a lot of highly configured code, where with this we were able to use some stuff that ServiceNow had already, so that saves time and money in development. And then we're making use of that capacity-based contract that I mentioned earlier. This is a cost savings to the government in 2 ways. By joining iClip with IROC, it could be a potential cost savings of $20 million over the lifetime of the contract. And then also by going live in May with iClip with not all the features released, we will not have to extend the ICBS contract, which could save us around $500,000. Next slide, please, Julie. All right, next we have NERV. So NERV came to us because they needed a secure way for people to access the NERV site, because previously it was a shared password sent out through email. So security officers don't really like that. So they came to us actually to FAMOF first to see if they could associate it with the dispatcher roles. But we have those in-house in IROC. And being as they wanted only dispatchers to make those reservations, and we had those roles within IROC and the order that they'll be getting the NERV from, it made sense to use that capacity-based contract again to add NERV. So with that, we're going to improve the security and improve tracking and documentation, and they'll be able to report better on those NERV vehicles, because there have been some lost in the past. And then, yeah, just a user-friendly interface. Dispatchers are going to be able to get to the NERV website directly from IROC. Right now, if you go into a dispatch center, you'll hear, oh, I have to do a NERV. So hopefully we'll make that easier for people. All right, and that will go live on May 28th. Next, we have NCR, Nationally Contracted Resources. Again, using the contract to, do the work within IROC. So, NIC dispatchers can receive an order for aviation, cruise, or, those caterers or showers and stuff like that. They'll be able to do a run to find the best value resource within IROC. So they can do it directly from the order, pretty much. This will replace WildNIC. The WildNIC application And yeah, that was part of the part of the Wildcat contract. But they were looking for something new. So we were able to add that in. What adding it to IROC does, it improves their efficiency. There's a lot of manual entry before, and then we're also going to be able to automate the cost determination package that goes to the COs that actually hire those resources. And then the vendors can status themselves within IROC rather than Nick having to make quite a few calls every day. And hopefully in the future, when IPA comes online, we'll have that contract data flow, so even less data entry will need to occur. The plan for this one is a rolling go live. So crews are going out April 17th, open for equipment mid-May, and then aviation mid-June. And as Julie mentioned, data management, the intent for this is to be able to query data faster by removing out your data from view. Right now, if you query a list in IROC, it'll pull data for the 5 years that we've been live. And sometimes that takes quite a bit of time. We're trying to reduce our data footprint, and we're also following data retention guidelines. Just a note, just a note, we were kind of holding out for data cache IDME when available, but the users were being affected by the data quite, like it was on our survey, it came out that that's one of the things they wanted to fix was, you know, the speed of our application. So we had to bump that up into IROC. Now you can go to the next one, Julie. So Rochelle, you sent out a note about some things maybe to talk about, and one of them was challenges. So one of the challenges we're facing right now is we have a lot of different features coming out in a very short time frame, right? All of these need to be completed by May or June. So we are running and gunning right now. As everyone probably knows, budget is an issue for everybody. And of course, due to budgets, we accelerated the go live of iClip for those cost savings. And then we just have more demand than capacity. Like Julie said, we have quite a large backlog of items. Many of those are requests from the user community for the application. And then, you know, we're adding some additional backlog items with the new modules. And then lately we've been running into some, I wouldn't say there are issues yet, but just some things to note is, you know, we might have a potential contracting reorg with the new administration, or the USDA was looking at using Stratus, or potentially I've heard that all contracting might go through GSA. So that could slow up timelines of getting things awarded and such. And then also the 4-letter acronym that we must not speak of has been looking at ServiceNow and the licensing. And they're just looking at some companies in particular to see how they're being used within the government. So I had to do a few data calls there. And then you asked, Rochelle, how you could help. Like Julie mentioned before, currently IROC, we're managing the catalog within the IROC application. We would love to get out of that game and have that be some steward group or something. Julie can speak more to that if she wants. You know, I know there's talk of the organizational data going somewhere else, you know, to combine or not to combine decisions. So we'll be interested in that if it's still a topic. And then I know we're in a tough time, so data management solution, as mentioned above, IDME, that kind of stuff. If it ever comes back around, we'd be interested in that for sure.
And I'll tag back in on that. I think Kara may have information on the resource catalog stuff. She's been working on the PMS 200 updates, working with the appropriate NWCG committees, data stewards from the NIAC group, equipment technology, incident business, all the various entities that have a say in the resource ordering catalog. And it's not just the free for all. People contact me or submit change requests that they want stuff added to the ordering catalog, it does get vetted through the appropriate NWCG committees, so things don't get out of hand. And then, yeah, once we get all that, just one point of updating that, preferably through Irwin. So we only have one API connection there, not multiple down the line. My last slide threw in here, just fun facts, requests in IROC by system of record since our go live date of March 2020. So yeah, obviously at the very beginning year 2020 was all IROC stuff. But as the CADs came online with resource integration 2021, CAL FIRE CAD, CAL FIRE HEMS, which is their equivalent to Viper, as well as WildCAD 6 back in the day, dabbled a little bit with resource integration in 21 and 22. And the numbers just continued growing until current. FireWeb, the ODF state CAD system, came online dabbling with resource integration in 2023 and things picking up in 2024. And then WildCAD coming online in 2023, and that's growing too. People getting comfortable with the systems, and might be some direction coming down anyways from the higher ups for resource integration, for a better snapshot of what resources are actually on incidents out there from the initial deployment from the station all the way through. So some fun facts there. Took that today pretty quick at 11 o'clock. So that's all we have. Thanks for your time. Anybody have questions for us?
I just am so happy to hear all of this. It's like you guys have been doing some amazing work. And I think it's one of those things that, you know, it sits in a small group of people know and realize how much you've been doing. And so to get, I'm just happy to have you guys have a chance to share it with the broader community. I thought it was great the way you presented your accomplishments and your plan. That was a super great way to see that and be able to see where you're at. I just thought that was really great. And then just really didn't fully appreciate the amount of work that you guys are trying to get done in a really short period of time with getting so much out before the spring. And so it's helpful, I think, for others to go, oh, yeah, that's why those guys all look, you know, bags under their eyes and worn out. You guys are doing a lot.
Well, I told them too that presentation was very good, and it made my EGP presentation look terrible because I was not prepared at all and didn't have a working application. And yeah, luckily Ani saved me. But yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah, really good. And I'm sure many of you have been doing the same thing, but it just so many times throughout this conversation in the last couple of days, it's like something will come up and it's like, oh, IDME, oh, right to the heart. We built a lot towards that and a lot of expectations, and I will just say that conversations are continuing. We've been meeting with the Forest Service Chief Data Officer to see what options she might be able to have. The CIO situation, we'll see how that pans out. But we are continuing to explore ways that we can at least hit some of those capabilities. But it's tough all around. So, Kara?
Nope, I just wanted to do kind of the same shout out, Rochelle. It's interesting, right? When you hear about some of these teams that are really small and they are eating the elephant every day. You know what I mean? So in both of, Elise and Julia is like, oh, and these are the other programs I manage, and these are the other programs I'm the business lead for. There's a very small group that's tearing this down the road. And so yeah, just sort of like that same shout out at all the work that IROC's trying to get done, and the massive coordination. And none of these decisions, and I just a specific shout out to Julie, right? None of none of that work is being done in a vacuum. Like she's put together so many different groups and conversations and, you know, you hate to think about this decision by committee, and it's not that. It's just that we need to really understand the big impacts, things like transferring the incidents and taking on the request dispatch center ID, et cetera. So just shout out tons of work. And I don't know that if people really understand the magnitude of the data that they're going to be able to get because of this work. So that's all.
Yeah, and I thought the chart at the end was really cool. I mean, it is a really good example of how we have really evolved. And so each of those requests coming in, like some of it's new, but it's like, I heard you say it several times, Elise and Julie. I've heard Kara say it like throughout the day, right? Like it keeps coming back to how do we make it easier for the field? How do we make it easier for the field? And I think that passion is just so appreciated, and also how we wear ourselves out. So please take care of yourselves, right?
And
like,
maybe not as widely appreciated as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it. And I will shout out to our developers and CAS because they have been there with us hammering hard. So
yeah.
We got a great team.
Yeah, Lisa's reading my mind, ditto on that. We have a great team all the way around, from the CAS team to our government SMEs that help us test everything. It's a full team effort, everybody wanting to do the best thing for the dispatch community. And yeah, we don't have off seasons. It's year round. We have Irwin season to Viper season to all these new modules coming in season to everybody wants a piece of IROC season, and the community wants things fixed, and it's a never ending story. And our developers have been awesome through all of this, and probably can be some pretty good dispatchers themselves out in the field doing this. So, and our help desk that helps the users calling in, and whether it's training issues because they don't know how to do something or don't know some business rules. So it's definitely an awesome team to be part of, and helps me get past that spaghetti chart 209 complex thing.
Yeah, go do some meditation, Julie, and get past your PSTD.
Data cleanup is my best zen ever.
That's it. Awesome. Awesome.
So thanks all.
Right. Well, thank y'all. And Scott, I think I did just promote you to a presenter. Do you have the permissions you need?
I believe so.
All right. Well, we will turn it over to you, sir.
Sounds good. I'm going to turn my camera on for 2 seconds here. Everybody can at least get to put a face with the name. So introduction, I'm Scott Lynn. I'm the National Program Manager for the Fire Danger Rating System for the U.S. Forest Service. I've been in this position now for a little over two and a half years. I guess 2.5, almost going on 3 years now. It's a term position. And I have been, but prior to that, the FEMS program had really been, or the FEMS application had been in development for a couple of years prior to me getting this position. So there was some groundwork already laid prior to me getting in here. So yeah, today we wanted to go over the FEMS program as a whole, kind of give a general briefing of where we're at, what the challenges are, where we're seeing things going next year or this year and the next couple of years. And really kind of just highlighting some of the successes that we found. And I just want to first state that this really cannot be done without the additional work and the additional help that people have really offered over the past couple of years for me. They've really gotten us to where we are today. Chuck Maxwell is definitely one of those, but Travis Vertigan and Cheryl Bright, they both have just stepped up and provided so much information and working towards getting to where we're at today. So anyways, I'm gonna turn off my camera and then I'm gonna do a screen share of our program, because I'm just gonna kind of actually do a little bit different. show you guys what we have in case you haven't seen it before, and talk about how we got to where we are and what we're looking at for the next for this year and the rest of the year. So first off, for those who haven't seen the FEMS application, what this is going to be a replacement for WIMS. WIMS was the Weather Information Management System, and it calculated, and it was the authoritative data set for National Fire Danger Rating System. FEMS is going to it additionally calculates the National Fire Danger Rating System, but it's built on a completely different premise than WIMS was ever established. WIMS was established with the idea of calculating fire danger once daily. And that was at what was called the RS time, the regularly scheduled time. Usually that was around 1200 or 1300 local station time. With the transition that we had a few years ago to the new NFDRS system, the capabilities were there to move towards a fully automated system and calculate fire danger on an hourly basis. And so with that information, WIMS, it was a very old system. They did their best to try and make it work for a new automated and hourly system. But there were some bugs that were integrated into making that code match up. And so we really just started from ground zero with this and saying really some of the main questions that we've worked towards is, what are the requirements first for calculating fire danger? And everything kind of stems back towards we need some certain inputs. We need a weather forecast, we need weather observations, and we need to know if there's snow cover on the ground or not. And so by getting at least those three things answered, we knew that we could move forward. But as we dug into each piece of those topics, there became more and more layers of understanding the data integrity, both the current forecast or current weather information and the historic weather information, and really how to integrate all of these things together to provide the users with the best information that they possibly could. So we started out with FEMS 1.0, and that was released about a month after I got into the position in 2022. It was a basic weather application. It just provided current weather data, and it had a historical weather service or information climatology that we received from the Desert Research Institute that we contracted out with. And that was one of the first main steps of kind of establishing that. And that was, again, being that first step, we realized there were some flaws in looking at our historical data. We realized there were some flaws in trying to bring over weather stations from WIMS into into FEMS. And we realized fairly quickly that we just needed to really sever all of our connections that we had from WIMS and start new utilizing authoritative data sources. And so that's what we did. We've started gaining all of our information, or at least our weather station information. We have a couple of sources. One is the BLM RAWS Depot from WX Weather. So we pull all of our metadata for the weather stations from there. We also pull our current observations from that point. We also know that we had in WIMS other stations from alternate gateway stations or stations that were required that were state-owned networks, and we needed to be able to bring those in. But those stations didn't necessarily meet or have all the requirements that were needed for calculate NFDRS fire danger. And so we're still actually working on some of those problems, and I'll talk about that in the future in a little bit here. So this is where we started out, really was a very basic map of our weather stations across the country. At first we brought in all the stations that we had, but we quickly realized that a lot of the stations had data integrity issues. The sensors weren't working properly. They weren't sited properly. They didn't have all the data that really needed to calculate fire danger. And so we went down and whittled through, and that was a lot of Chuck and Cheryl's work to really whittle down the information that we had and really start working on that base data integrity, because until we had the weather piece figured out, until we continue to get it more refined, that really impacts our fire danger outputs drastically. And it was really apparent when we started mapping this information how important that was going to be. And then once we started actually getting some of the calculations moving forward. So it also, some of the important pieces of this is while this was all occurring, WFDS NextGen was continuing with development and they needed the information that we had. So we were kind of running tandem with them saying, hey, we're trying to work through this, but we still had a lot of questions, but they were moving forward, at a fairly quick or a fairly rapid pace, trying to get the information so they could continue to build the data systems that they needed. So we were at least able to provide them with some rough or some very base information so they could test all their connections and run the models that they needed to, but we knew that it wasn't going to be all the the final information. So we were having a lot of communications with the WFDS NextGen team while we were going through our development phases and just making sure that the two connections were working well. Also working with the RAWS depot and making sure that we had all the connections that we needed from their side. So there were a lot of integration that we had to do between at least those two systems to start out with, just to even start showing weather data. So that's where we started, and really where we focused probably about the first year and a half of our time, or at least since I was here, was working on the data integrity piece and understanding really the core foundation and making sure that we could, actually one of the big pieces was we needed to have some control over the data that was coming in. That was one of the other issues with WIMS, is that a lot of users could log in, change data, adjust locations of stations, and it wasn't matching the other authoritative data sources. And so we needed to really lock that down so that we could make sure we provided consistency for this system, which is definitely a different use than it's definitely a different practice than what the field has been used to. They used to have more of a Wild West and they could go in and do what they wanted. And we've really locked this system down from that. So I'd have to say, for first off, one of the first things I'm, most proud of about this year, this excited, is one, having this data, having the weather information that we have completed. Additionally, the next steps that, we have finally gotten to, and I'll go just real quick into our staging environment, and you can see first off the difference between these two systems, and you'll see on the east of the Rockies here how many more stations that we have compared to what are available in the current version. We've been able to bring in our synoptic weather data from the Synoptic Incorporated, and they provide us access to thousands of other weather stations across the country. And so we're going to be able to provide a lot more information than users have been used to in the past. Additionally, we were able to been working very heavily with the fire lab, and we've actually been able to start calculating now fire danger. Please understand that all the red dots that you see here are all those ASOS or airport weather stations, and we don't have fire danger calculated for them just yet. We're working on that, but those will be populating. But any of the other areas that you can see across the country, you can see where we do have fire danger being calculated. And it might seem like it was a fairly easy task to just, populate the weather and get fire danger running through the calculator. But there are many steps within that to actually get this to occur and to get it to actually match what users are expecting and being able to verify against the other softwares that are out there. So we've actually been able to get that to happen. We have we're moving towards this release for fire danger in the next month and a half, and the field will be able to fully utilize the system for this summer. So they'll be able to have two concurrent systems, the old WIMS, so that they can continue that transition while they move towards the FEMS data in the near future. So I'd have to say the main two accomplishments and most excited about is actually getting fire danger produced for the users, and knowing that our data behind it is about as robust as we can. It's the most robust data source that we have had ever for fire danger, and so I can truly say that's it has been no easy task, and but it's really something that I think users should be able to be very proud of. What we can expect to see this year again is we're going to continue to get the release of Fire Danger. We're working towards a lot of the integration or more of the user interface with tables and charts so that users can have more of an interactive experience. These are going to just meet the basic requirements that WIMS had. We haven't gotten into any more of the advanced features as of yet. But those are towards more future development, but at least we'll provide them the switch over necessary from WIMS to FEMS. And then we're working towards future enhancements later this year, especially around our data integrity. When we have stations that are missing data, you can see they don't calculate fire danger. And we need to be able to understand how to start calculating fire danger and how we can start processing that information to provide the users with the, fire danger if there is, or even displaying and showing them that, hey, you're missing information, and working towards getting their stations back up to speed in a timely manner. So those are really the expectations for this year is the continuation of fire danger and really working towards some of the more simple enhancements that users have been sold, that we're told we're going to be part of FEMS when it was first pitched that there was going to be a new system out there. Give me one break here. And I apologize if there's questions during this time, please let me know. Definitely very willing to entertain any questions as we move forward. What challenges did we experience and overcome? Well, boy, Chuck, maybe you can, I don't know if you want to jump in on some of those challenges, but some of them that I will say is actually just working or getting our fire danger calculator to produce data, understanding the code, making sure that it is populated and reading all the information properly, and really getting that data to match what we produce out of Fire Family Plus was a monumental task in itself. Other issues that we've had, I know there have been a lot of just regular developmental issues that I think occur with most application development. But again, even moving towards the weather integrity, and it seemed about every turn that we could, every time we thought we had something right with the weather, we had to kind of take a step back and re-evaluate our processes to make sure that we were getting the right weather data as we move forward. Other challenges with that would be trying to even find the data sources, how we could integrate the ASOS and other Mesonet stations into our system when they didn't have all the data requirements. That's one of our challenges that we continue to work with to date. But we've learned how to start moving forward in those areas. Chuck, what other big ones do we have? I'm going to have you jump in here.
Data alignment, we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
Just trying to line up historical with current with forecast. It was like lining up wires in the server room. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my next presentation, but yeah, it just was really difficult. We deal with point data, thousands and thousands, getting those aligned temporally, everything was just really complex. So I'll talk a bit more about it, but tough. What else, Scott? Where can I get a slow? What's that?
Cheryl's on too. You
can pipe right in, Cheryl.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is that like none of this data is created by fire or us, or so it really, other than the field sample, but none of the weather, fire danger, it's all science based. So this literally was one big, and still is one big research to operations process, trying to figure out how to not only align data, but align science as well.
Well said, and I'll be well represented in my presentation about the entire business area, because I think that's what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
So
Scott, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, I just have a few. My presentation goes over these same things and provides the business area perspective, so we'll cover some of that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've looked at FEMS and as we've thought about data management and we've thought about IDME, like FEMS was just timing wise, right? Like it seemed like a really good place to explore what that looked like and what would happen if we're really focused on enterprise data and we were looking at IDME again, back to the stab in the heart every time we say it. Just how we can walk through this in a different way, and I think we've learned a lot. I think this is a really technical area, and so it's a little bit different in that, like you said, so much of the data doesn't necessarily belong to us or originate with us, right? And so there's some complexity there that that you guys have had to work through, and you guys as Scott and Cheryl and Travis and Chuck and others trying to get in there and kind of parse that out. And I think the other thing that's happened with this is that we've uncovered a lot of, or you guys, I can't include me in that. You guys just tell me about it. A lot of instances where we made an assumption a long time ago. And then we've built a whole bunch of things on that assumption, and that assumption may not be as solid as we thought it was. And so just kind of trying to work through that, I think it's what you've been dealing with is more, there's the complexity of the application development itself. There's the complexity of the science and the data part of it, but there's a layer of dealing with the culture that is also really challenging. And so you guys have continued to do a really good job. And Scott, you've been such a great addition to this and just have such a good team put together. So congratulations on that. And you're making progress and it makes a difference. So thank you.
I think it's back to you, Scott.
Did we lose Scott?
Give me a minute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We got you.
Okay. Hold on one second. I'm trying to switch over to a headset.
That's okay. Steve and I were sitting here looking at the screen and my whole computer shut down.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, I apologize about that. No, thank you very much for the compliments. I appreciate it. And yeah, like I said, this is definitely way beyond something that I could have done by myself, and it's really needed to have the expertise that's working with me. So so I think really there's many other challenges just on the daily basis. I know that we've gone through and we haven't even touched. This is only looking at the point system. And if we really wanted to start talking about and getting some of the complexities of trying to move this, part of FEMS was moving to a gridded system as well, and gridded fire danger. And that's actually a whole separate project in itself that we're working towards on a peripheral side. But we need to master the point system first before we can really get into gridded. And there's still a lot of questions around that we are still working through. But so those are, I think, continued challenges as we start to move forward that we've really had. So our priority is really for the next for users. It is really, like I said, it's going to be more of the enhancement features and trying to integrate some of the analysis information and really trying to fully automate a lot of the rest of the needs that we have. There is, when a weather station is missing an observation for an hour, or if it misses, misses a week or 2 weeks worth of data, how do we repopulate that information? Users in WIMS were used to being able to go in there and just put in data and put in weather readings, even with no quality checking. And so we're really working towards that, those data standards for how do we get that, what does it look like, and how do we really start integrating that in an automated process into FEMS. And then you have to go through and do another calculation of fire danger and correct the calculations that we had. So we're really working towards a lot of that information of how do we manage that as a whole to keep really working towards that, again, that data integrity that we've strived to maintain from the get-go. And so besides, and I think that's a lot of the background that users won't see. That's the information that they want. A lot of the users want the bells and the whistles and all the charts and fancy tables and graphs and all that, and we'll get there. But it's not really worth us developing too far out for all of those users if we haven't answered the first pieces of this and really manage and provide them with reasonable fire danger readings and reasonable outputs, as well as just the weather stations as well. So I feel like that's where we're really focusing on over the next few months. The next year is going to be kind of working towards that area and that arena. Opportunities and collaboration and coordination with other projects. Boy, there's a lot that we can start bringing into. I know Smoke has really talked quite a bit about this, bringing in, smoke sensors, bringing in soil moisture sensors onto these stations and displaying that information. Again, there's a lot of additional moving towards gridded information and a lot of collaboration and coordination with NOAA, potentially with USGS, and even working with NASA towards the future and looking at some of the different remote sensing capabilities that they have to provide us that different types of information. So really, there's a lot more of areas that we can start moving towards. We have, again, a lot of different data that we're going to be serving towards different areas. And I think that's one of the different pieces about this is that in the past, a lot of like WOOFT has had its own fire danger calculator, and now that we're able to produce this information and feed it in a smoother way to different applications, I think that providing this to EGP, providing this to WOOFT to start out with, looking in towards getting it into IFTDIS, those are all opportunities for us going forward that we can start being more of a data server in the future. Let's see, in the challenges in the next year or two, really funding obviously has been a big one for us. And that's obviously, starting this year is the funding limitations have really hit us hard. We've had to really take a big hit on our development team. And, it looks like by, end of June, that'll be the end of our real strong push of development until we can start getting, additional funding and get a team really built back up again. So it's going to kind of, it's going to take some time. That's going to be a big piece is that we had, finally gotten a strong development team built up, and we're starting to lose some of that expertise that they had. So trying to, once we get everything going back again, hopefully, sooner rather than later, getting that expertise and getting everybody wrapped or caught up, the development side, caught up on what we're really doing, because it's way beyond, I think, what even most of the application development team had gone through in the past. It's not just, taking some numbers, ingesting them, and spitting them out on a map. There's a lot more beyond that I think the team has really stepped up to and started to really understand what we're trying to accomplish here in the bigger goal of things. So, and that I think is a big challenge that we have going forward. Additionally, one of the next, I think some of the other, fundamental challenges that we have is the overall paradigm shift that we have incorporate or built into FEMS and how end users are going to accept this and really get them to transition to not having all of their buttons and everything to go in and adjust and play, and really starting to bring them along to the new system, letting them take the time to adjust to the new system and knowing how to interact with the data in the different ways that we have provided it. Again, that's one of the different pieces for us, is that instead of just trying to provide answers directly from our system, we wanted to provide the data that users could take and possibly integrate into the new ways and moving towards more crowdsourcing of information and displays as we go forward, possibly integrating Power BI into our system so that if a user develops a very good display for that unit that they're working on, that we'd be able to share that across the country and utilize it without having to have people build their individual spreadsheets all by themselves and having that happen each time. So those I think are some of the challenges. That's another big challenge, is just bringing the field along, getting them to understand how to use this data and understand really the fundamental changes that have occurred within FEMS itself. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on where we're at, because I think that's about my half hour-ish of time, and I wanted to open it up for some questions.
I'm going to put Nick on the spot and see if he has any comments or thoughts to share.
No, I think Scott hit it, especially with the gridded part. We can figure some stuff out with the point data and have different people working on the gridded thing, but it's not going to be a fast process or a quick solution.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. And we will move on to Chuck to finish us out.
Woo!
All right.
Am I coming through okay now, Don?
Yep. Sounds great.
Excellent. Let me try to array myself here for, thank you. Trying to array myself here for success. So I'll visit first. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Chuck Maxwell, meteorologist. Sorry, I've been so many different jobs, I forget what I'm doing. Right now, I'm the Fire Environment Business Lead for the Data Management Program. Been working a lot with Scott and the team we just talked about, and been on for about a year. My last data summit was the first one. And so let me go through and give you kind of a rundown of where we've been, what we've seen, where we're going. And as I think you will see, it is a research to operations project in process. It's not just data governance standards and so forth. So let me go to the tape. If I can find it. So, okay, is that coming through in presentation mode?
Got it.
Outstanding. All right, so I already said that. Just a little bit about me more that you need to kind of know is I'm on a mission, basically kind of a multi-decadal mission to figure out what's going on with the interconnectedness between fire weather, fire danger, fire behavior. I've been I guess a licensed meteorologist for almost 35 years. I ask a lot of questions, a lot of annoying questions. I really want to know what is, what was, why, what could be, what should be. I guess I'm kind of a double loop learner. Former incident meteorologist, so I kind of have a breadth of experience from including that, 25 to 30 years of operational and program management experience and development of products and predictive services. Participated, managed most of the S courses involving fire and environment, and been on or involved with most of the subcommittees. So I've just been kind of knee deep, probably chest deep in this for a long, long time. And my real perspective is really one of a long-time fire environment practitioner, trying to make things happening by figuring out the institutional knowledge and starting with the existing guidance and practice as a starting point before making changes and stirring things up. So I kind of like to scrape and see what's been, what's happening, what's going on with regard to what should be before making changes. Really what this is, I tend to be too verbose at times. I'm going to be talking about kind of the past year, like what my expectations were when I got here, what I've learned over the past year, including looking at the fire environment metrics I ended up coming up with, and then looking ahead towards some stuff probably over the next year. And it will be some good interrelationships with what Scott mentioned and Nick and Cheryl. So just some real framework information. When I arrived on scene, there'd already been a bunch of work before done about all the business subject areas. There's some massive structures in place, and they'd already kind of fleshed out a fire environment business subject area. And I was presenting with some information like this and basically described, this is a way to organize data and applications around a certain business segment or domain. It was in a few years ago, so it wasn't the complexity it is right now, but really in concept, the collective of all interagency data and applications related to fire weather, fire danger, fire behavior, and similar. That's a pretty big bucket, and it touches things a little bit outside the fire environment, as we'll see, and creates some complications and some interesting things to talk about. Just some real foundational things I'm supposed to be working on, and I have been working on: terminology, data inventory, standards, and enterprise view. So as you'll see, we kind of started looking at terminology as a starting point, and that was an interesting endpoint. But I did end up touching on all these. We'll talk a little bit about that. One of the first things, and I think Gabriella spoke to this, again, pretty new to the data management perspective, taking all the terminology we have in NWCG glossary, categorizing it to see who the stewards are, and was, I guess, pretty excited to see that most of it did fall under the fire environment area, the fire environment subcommittee of FEMS. Again, just kind of seeing, just categorizing and getting some kind of lay of the land of what the business area is. Did find it interesting, a bunch of terms fell outside of that and other subcommittees. And there'll be something to track down, and I'll talk about that. Again, this is an area that touches a lot of different things and isn't necessarily managing those things. I think Cheryl kind of alluded to that. I won't spend too much time on this because I already went through it, but I do want to go over what I try to do in terms of categorizing. Instead of looking at the stewards, I decided to let's look and see where these terms apply to in terms of maybe data and practices. Okay, realizing each of the different committees and like there were multiple different areas where stuff was being used. So I went back to all the business terms we had in fire environment and basically recategorized them by these things. So application, what I would call traditional business area in red, authoritative reference, and institutional fire science. And I have those as described there. So for me, what's key is application stuff is driven, we've talked about that, driven by an application. It changes over time. It may change not because a decision was made to change the reference. It was a system decision. The authoritative reference and the terms I use are things we point to, like global references, really strong references, World Meteorological Association, American Meteorological Society, NIST, things which are tied to the to definitions of physical properties and components that really are not arguable. Institutional fire science is just when I identified a bunch of stuff that was associated with our fire sciences over the years, where the terminology and business rules seem to be connected more to that than any one steward. So basically, I was just looking at the topography here and saying that, hey, there's a whole different way to look at this. When I kind of broke it up and looked at the different subcommittees, I was really interested to see that there was a vast array of differences. You can see the impact of applications and kind of the fire sciences in there in terms of green and purple. And if you think what I do, 25 years ago when I came into this business, this whole thing would have been red. It would have been all kind of traditional NWCG business training standards. The other stuff was always there, but it wasn't as obvious. Now it's very obvious. It's very obvious. It's changing and moving, and it's very obvious it's different across all of our stewards and people we're working with. So there's a good topography out there of what all this stuff is actually going to. So it makes it hard to figure out who to track down to talk to resolve the terms and the business. Another effort that was done, I'm not sure when this was, I think maybe 5-10 years ago, I got a whole bunch of analyses I looked at like this to try and to basically make some kind of order out of it. This is a fair one. I don't exactly know when it's from. And I try and categorize things like, what does this mean? Where's this going to? Is it an observation? Is this something that's widely used or minimally used? You still see some structure and stuff. Some things come out the top. Current observations almost always come out towards the top of the structure. But when I compare this to everything else I looked at, it's not making a lot more sense. It seems to get a little more complicated the more things I look at. The more I grade the road, the more complexity I find. So Rochelle directed me to try and use the example from Irwin, where they were able to come up with some pretty good lanes to maybe figure out how to look at this differently. Now, this was a good example because it was successful, and they came up with ends up being kind of a matrix, which is where this is going, based on stakeholders on one side and incident activity. Again, using a really known good example, I'm like, okay, can I do something like this with fire environment? And the first thing that occurred to me is, well, I can, except I know that in this system here, we determine and control every single piece in the system, except when the fires actually start. When I deal with the fire environment, I'm going to be dealing with some different things that I don't control. And how will that change how I categorize things? I know it sounds wonky and crazy. I think it'll play out. So again, what I came away with, I got a bunch of information over the past year, and I'm still seeing fire environment as more that top upper right picture there, kind of the server room you don't want to go into. I did see a lot of efforts, good efforts over the years to kind of get this more towards the bottom right, to get things kind of corralled, aligned, and figured out. It just seems like there's been surges of effort every 5 years, including the more recent one with Emmy's work. We've never really gotten over the hump. We've never really got up to that bottom right picture. We still don't have a really solid self-identified fire environment business area. I don't know how many people would self-identify, or people or programs would self-identify as being totally within the fire environment business area, if I ask. So how do we start thinking of a different way to do this? So one of the things I think of, and this is Cheryl raised this when we're talking about categorizing, who authoritativeness. This is why fire environment is so different. Who has authority over wind, gravity, combustion, phenological processes on the Fahrenheit scale? It's not really a question to the group, but you can see it's probably different than everybody else. I guess the problem, the issue is we do not. It's pretty much a universal thing, and the laws of physics control that. We have names we've given them and so forth. But really, when we develop categories for a natural physical system with laws and rules of so forth like this have been used for centuries, we kind of have to work with that. So I kind of looked at this a different way, like, hey, can I look at this thing I'm doing as like a natural system where I know I have to address the fact that there's these things going on, fuels have to grow, things have to burn, there's kind of an order of things that work. Will it be helpful in bringing any order to that server room number one? I showed this is a little break so people get a brain break, but I showed this to the DMP after describing this same exact information to you, and nobody understood what I was talking about. So I'm trying to find a simple way. This is a fractal. What I like about these is at any level of magnification, it shows the same thing. So if you can come up with a proper, simple, kind of foundational structure, maybe you can use that over and over and over again in different ways to help corral things and figure things out. So it just kind of came to me, and I'm like, maybe this fractal thing will somehow work with fire environment. We shall see. So I went out down this thing, again, kind of a science project. I started thinking, how are things now in the fire environment? If I were to make a little flow chart, which what those little weird triangles are, kind of from time, top to bottom, how does incident activity, drawing off the Irwin example, how does that intersect with fire environment? Well, I see it as a very reactionary system where we start with getting fires and seeing fire behavior and having observations, and we tend to react because we have to, right? It's part of what we do is respond. There's a real heavy prioritization on near-term information to fight the going fire, and sometimes gathering some of the forward-looking information in the secondary. And that's just kind of the way it is. I accept that. Observation and communication of the ongoing immediate threats basically is the biggest deal. But what was driving that before it happened? Because we're predicting this out ahead of time. So I thought of this a little bit different way I'm going to ask you to entertain. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I think we have to. I entertained a different concept, like what if we kind of arrange that the way maybe things might work or could work, or in some kind of sense that makes sense. So I tried arranging the fire weather, I guess, columns or different we call it systems, focus areas we already have in our system in a way that kind of made more sense to me, the way that things built upon each other on the top right. And for me, it's like, okay, you can say, well, it has to be a universe, a planet, and so forth, but eventually there's an atmosphere, there's climate and weather. Fire danger is mathematical representation of climate and weather that's supposed to represent our fuels. Fuels grow, they get to a certain condition where they become flammable. We have fire activity and fire behavior. And then there's return effect with the fire effects loop and stuff. It affects the whole thing. So I'm like, we're looking at it, making categories in that way do anything for me. Don't know, but I thought I would try. On the left-hand side, same with if you look at environmental science, there's some pretty basic structures that have been ongoing for years. You have an observation always before forecasts. There's usually analysis process in there, but there's a very clear flow of observe, analysis, forecast, repeat. And so I tried putting these two things together and kind of make a different way of looking at things. It helps us get anything out of it. So I came up with this, and I'll describe it in the next slide here in a way that I hope is helpful. But again, this is just a matrix. It doesn't mean a whole lot to me right now, except for maybe 20 bunches of wires instead of the thousands I saw in the server room. But in order for this to make sense, it has to be relational, and you all have to understand it as well. And so I'll flip to the next section here where I hope to explain that. One of the things I saw, hopefully this is working. Yeah. So a couple things I saw as I sat back and looked at this over time is that as you go from the top left to the bottom right of this little structure here, you're going from now or the past to the future. So time is kind of built into this, which is helpful in prediction and forecasting and so forth. The left-hand side, much more is an increasingly analytical and prognostic kind of line there as you go down. And the top up there is increasingly comprehensive in terms of all the different fire, environment, business subjects. So as I looked at this more, I'm like, man, the stuff in the top left is really foundational, recent and past information. Everything in that bottom right is much more comprehensive and forward-looking. I kind of thought of these as being able to apply, this is my fractal thing, this can apply to data. It can apply to data for programs. It can apply to people's requirements, programs require. So anything fire environment in my mind can be bent some way in this contrivance. How can this be helpful? Right now, maybe not so much. I'm going to skip that for now. So one of the things I wanted to, so this is what Scott said. Scott was going to this, like, hey, so how could this be used, if at all? So say you don't know. I remember I'm using this as a communication tool for not just fire environment SMEs, but budget people, folks who are doing IT, people who have no idea what any of this stuff is and are looking for any way to relate it and make sense of it. So Scott said, if I need to look at this and figure out what I need, I kind of figured out the structure and hierarchy that if you need something in any individual cell on here, you're going to have to hit all the ones above it and to the left of it. Seems pretty basic, but it seems to kind of work. So Scott mentioned if you're going to be producing fire danger forecasts like FEMS is, you're going to definitively have to hit all those boxes in this little array here, all the climate, weather, observations, analysis, and forecasts, all the fire danger parts. I mean, seems simple, right? If you're going to go big and produce visualizations of landscape fire modeling or fire behavior modeling outcomes, I suspect you're going to use all or part of that array. Maybe not all of it, and it isn't all in the right order, but just trying to get scale and scope here of what's more foundational, what's more comprehensive, what builds off of what's bigger than what, and so forth. I'll stop after this to take some questions and to breathe. I started sitting back, I'm like, boy, what if I took every program, every standards guide I have, every system, everything, and filled this out and overlaid it and did a heat map? Where would there be gaps? Where would there be strengths? And where would there be weaknesses? Would there be relationships between things? So I just kind of made some efforts like how I might portray like how things show up to me on this matrix. WXX, looking at John and like RAWs, there's a definite component there in the observation analysis and communication visualization of RAWs. The fuels program, that's what I call vegetation characteristics. FEMS, as Scott talked about, you can see how it's built in here, covers climate and weather, and through the field sample module, some of the vegetation characteristics. I think you can see where this is going. You can characterize programs, needs, requirements, systems, whatever, on this fire environment matrix by what they need and compare it to each other, knowing that the top left is much more foundational, bottom right more comprehensive. So I recognize as I'm doing this and blowing everybody's minds, including myself, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm just making a little contrivance here that maybe we can work with. Really, I think my matrix is the blue on here, and there's probably a much bigger picture that we're touching. It may even be a cube, multi-dimensional array. I just want to stop now because I'm not looking at the chat at all, seeing everyone's paying attention. Are there any comments or questions about this to this point? Does it make any kind of sense? I'm going to talk about it some more, but.
Yeah, I think, Chuck is going over something really quickly that took a lot of time to evolve. And he's talked to a lot of people, shown this to a lot of people. He had to show it to the data management program. He had to show it to us 4 or 5 times for us to start going, oh, we think we know where you're going now. So it's definitely a work in progress, but it is, I really liked, I got really excited when he was showing the matrix and just because I think what we end up doing is we know that something we're working on has dependencies somewhere else, but we don't have a real way of systematically being able to compare those dependencies or identify those dependencies. And I know Jessica Haas has been trying to do some work to figure out some ways to represent that as we're talking about our applications, like we've seen already this week, right? How much the interdependency there is, and to find a way that we can actually help people understand that is tough. And so this is very complex, right, BJ? Yeah, you just got to sit there for a minute and go, wow. But I hope that this like also resonates. So you can go, hey, maybe there is a way that we can start actually categorizing and understanding some of these dependencies and relationships. And yeah, so it's been amazing to watch Chuck do this. All those years of experience and his background just brings a different dimension to the way we've been thinking about data.
It does. Andrew, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I love that you didn't use the business subject areas, but I love that you hit some of them anyway, and some things that aren't business subject areas, but you show the relationship between them, because that's one of the big things that was missing from business subject areas. It's great that we can kind of lump different capabilities together and talk about them as, you know, functional areas. But when you do that and you then launch into something like FEMS or WFDS NextGen, and we've had trouble talking about those kinds of tools, that how well, what is WFDS NextGen or what is WFDS? I remember it being a kind of smack in the forehead moment when it's like, well, it's really a workflow that unites all these different things. FEMS in some ways is parts of a workflow, and you can't do WFDS NextGen without something that does some of the things that FEMS does. I like this way of, I don't think I understand it all the way, and I think I could probably sit down with one of these charts and an idea and then fill out the same chart 3 times and put different things in the boxes each time and probably arrive at some very interesting conclusions. But I love thinking about our environment this way. It's great. This is good stuff. This is the first time I've seen it.
And that's actually a plan. It was going to be for the one that we missed. We were going to have people like put their own ideas in here as to where they fit or what should be on here. So maybe we do that going forward once we have a basic idea, which I fully get it too. So thank you, Andrew.
Yep. Thank you.
And I think having this framework, you know, it's a framework. It's something to hang ideas off of, and for us to all be talking in that same language. And yeah, it took several times seeing this to wrap my head around it, and it's still fresh and new.
Yeah, it's barely from my mind. Let me ask you a question. Is Pete Lom on at all?
I was looking.
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are.
I was gonna kind of call him
I
out because
promised you I'd be on for your talk, Chuck.
Well, I know, but I didn't. I wasn't
wasn't
gonna make a comment, man. But I you notice, if you guys notice, that smoke and air quality is not definitively on here.
Wasn't well covered in the definitions either, by the way.
I know.
I could build one of these and put smoke in there somewhere, though.
Right.
It probably is off to the right.
Yeah, it's probably in that fire effects loop, right? Or we make another column, or we
The missing column of fire effects.
You got it. Well, go
There's
ahead, Peter.
vegetation characteristics feedback too that's not there also, by the way.
Did you have any comments, Peter?
No. I mean, I think that I want to build on what Andrew just said, that I think we would have our own different frameworks that we create this by. One of the challenges around air quality is that there's a number of these columns that are pretty important in the context of smoke generation, smoke likelihood, smoke effect. So Chuck and I spent some time last week going through that a little bit. What about the challenges of the South Carolina wildfire that was experienced this spring and is still smoldering with millions of gallons of resistance, to try to get the thing out. Where does that fit in our triage of addressing some of the things that help drive this framework and so on? So there's a bunch of different elements to it. So I'm with Andrew in his comment, devil's in the details, and adding a few more details into it.
Right
on. I'll stop there.
Yeah, if you haven't, I see this as a system of systems. So I think you're dead on. That's why I'm leaving room for lots more matrices here, because that's what really got going on. Okay,
Well,
thank you guys.
Sorry, I think too, Chuck, if you can go back to that, like, I mean, I think you're starting with the area that you're most familiar with, right? But
Right.
I would love to like take this type of framework and then apply it on something that we all think we understand really well, like, incidents or resources or resource ordering, or, like, I mean, it feels like we could kind of use this type of framework to drill down into different. The thing I think you did is you kind of like started with a product, right? And that's Larrabee for years has always said, like, let's start with the end in mind, right? What is it that we want? Then figure out what we need. And so I think because fire environment is product driven, right? Like there's just kind of some nuances here that allowed us to think about things a little differently. And so I would be really curious then to see what that might look like if we looked at resource order, right? Like what are the columns, what are the rows, and how could we make that same type of thing work? So I think it's a interesting way of maybe being able to look at some things that we haven't been able to clearly define before.
Yeah. Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, that is the way I kind of look at things. It is a product. It's in my achiever, clips and strengths, right? Okay, moving on. So I just want to go over some of the stuff. This is just reviewing some of the activities over the past year, some of our overlap with Scott, and should tie into everything else we've seen. I think we wrapped up in about 20 minutes. I did spend some time working with Gabriella and Edge to begin populating with all the terms. Here's a term I helped develop a long time ago that I'm just not content with. I mean, that's what I call not a good, and I call it a disconnected business term. But one of the things we have been doing is over time gradually populating Edge with some of the robust stuff. We're putting the entire NFDRS4 fuel model complexes in there. We're putting a whole bunch of other things like that are frameworks that are interrelated, so you can go in there and click around and work with it. So I was doing this in anticipation of IDME coming up big and being able to work on this, so I backed off on this a little bit. But it is super important. I really appreciate the help of Don and Gabriella. I shared it with some folks. I really would like to see some stuff. We can get stuff. You saw the example Don showed. If we get enough stuff in here about fire environment and Edge, we can get automatic outputs into standards or guides and publications and so forth out of this system. So over time, as we continue to build this, I'll make it more robust and interconnected as always. Something that came up from Mr. John Noneman, there's a request to DMP, I think a month or so back, to support developments of a lightning detection data standard. As some may know, we're in the business, we've done a little bit of flip. We had one vendor for like 15, 20 years, it changed to another one for 5, then the lightning contract came back up. Because of our inability really to give solid specs, we got stuck with what the vendors gave us. They weren't compatible, and we were unable to do backwards analysis. So it was a real kind of weird situation for the past 5 years. We were unable to do historical analysis using aligned lightning data, which is a bit of a problem for me. And the BLM was stuck putting out RFQs for lightning without having any real good specs. So John kind of raised a flag on this. I was able to convene a small group. It was basically Nick Nosler, Paul Sopko, and myself. We went through the past stuff that had been done, came up with some pretty solid specs, mostly Nick did. And including in those, we actually got some decent specs out of it that we can use as standards, and included with those were 72-hour public display of lightning, as opposed to 48 hours. And automatically 10 years of backward compatible historical data from any vendor was going to pick this up. And so I know it was awarded. So we should have better public display of lightning and a guarantee of 10 years of backward compatible historical data as soon as that's worked out. And we had a meeting this morning, we'll be working out the technical details soon. So again, key came from the field as a need, interagency need, picked up and addressed it pretty quickly. Putting it through as a contract specifications, and then turning those into draft standards and Edge to run through the interagency community for approval and concurrence. So that's one of the things I think we'll be doing more of as it comes. A lot of work, as Scott had mentioned. There's a lot of work on the RAWS quality control, quality assured data set for NFDRS version 4. So I think Scott did mention that, but we're using a combination of point and graded data. to look at our RAWS stations and comparing it to high resolution graded data for North America. And we're basically able to fill in and complete to assess the data coming out of the stations. If it's missing, is it inaccurate or suspicious, and fill it in with a scientifically valid replacement. So it's a really nice feature. I mean, it's different data. It smooths out all the anomalies, assesses and replaces missing and suspicious data. There is some systematic bias when you do this, okay? You don't get the exact same numbers, but you get higher quality, more consistent, repeatable. So it is a new paradigm, and as mentioned earlier, it's starting to shift the responsibility for station level data quality, at least in databases and stuff, to a much more systematic process. We're going through after the fact and QA/QCing everything on a systematic basis on a time schedule. So we're kind of cleaning up after the fact and leaving the best possible records behind all the time. Bunch of stuff also new for FEMS. I was glad to be able to help out with the FEMS API for the WFDS NextGen Wind Matrix. That was cool. It's basically a windrows kind of thing, but we're able to get something set up where they can pull their wind matrix information pretty quickly. Works with Nick Nosler and others, done quite a bit of alignment of gridded data feeding into the FEMS forecast situation. This is a huge world. I could show tons and tons of this, but basically we have tons and tons of gridded forecast data of different flavors and varieties, different time increments, different spatial scales and temporal scales. This is just an example here in the picture of how we lined up for certain days which models we're going to grab certain elements for an FDRS version 4. So it isn't just as simple as get a forecast. It's get the right forecast for the right application from the right source. So this definitely takes some mess to me. I definitely appreciate the work from Nick and others who helped me. And there's a lot of coordinating of these graded data choices, and there's lots and lots of more choices to come. A huge thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, we have not been able to, due to data requirements for solar radiation, fire danger has not been routinely calculated for airport stations in the United States. So in cooperation with Texas A&M Forest Service, big credit to them, we're using an algorithm they developed for solar radiation RASOS to basically help deploy or add another 570 stations or so of the airports to all the places east of the Rockies of the next FEMS release. Over on the left, I guess the top picture is what it was the before picture, what solar radiation would look like, solar rad would look like from the airport and RAWs compared. And as we're optimizing that, we're getting towards something where there's like less than 10% error. We think we're going to achieve that nationwide and be able to use almost the entire airport network over time as part of the fire danger rating system. That's huge. There's at least 1,000 stations there and a couple thousand more we could use over time. So that's huge. Big thanks. Excellent collaboration. Really appreciate the folks at Texas A&M Forest Service. To wrap this up, I guess I wanted to do a micro case using my little matrix here and addressing a bit of an issue we found during the FEMS project and ongoing. We have a need, if I were to ask right now, how many of our 3,300 remote automatic weather stations right now, out in the ground banging away, are capable of supporting NFDRS version 4 calculations? Well, I can tell you it's less than half right from the get-go. It's kind of amazing. But when I look at my little matrix here, I'm like, okay, so what am I looking at here? I'm looking at observations from looking at weather observations that feed fire danger calculations. Very foundational. Is there a standards and data-driven process I can use to sweep our systems and tell me maybe every day if which of our stations are or are not NFDRS version 4 capable, if new ones have come up or if they've moved? I would think we'd be able to do that. So I started on that path and I just want to share that with you. Again, so trying to figure out how we can utilize what we have to go after sweeping the system to every day see what we have in terms of meeting standards. We started with the standards and what was necessary for version 4, and Scott mentioned that. We had to look at individual sensor capabilities, a bunch of stuff. So all this stuff is in WXX, and that system makes it very easy to pull the data out of. So this was easy. So basically going after a template for detecting station capability. As we know, we're going to have thousands and thousands of stations to choose from. We're going to want to choose stations that have certain capabilities for certain applications. So starting down the process of figuring that out. So we went down the road, and then the standards for RAWs. It says, hey, if you go in there, you should be able to look at the first 11 or 12 sensor fields in WXX. And if you scan the chef ID, it'll tell you, it'll basically tell you meeting the standards there. You can scan each of these. If those are in there, those stations should be go. So we're like, sweet, this should be simple. Well, the more we looked with those chef codes, they were not unique. And this has nothing to do with WXX, by the way. This is a collaborative effort. It's just the way it is with data. The chef code ended up not being unique and not being viable for a standard, at least within the system. So we had to switch over to the output code within WXX. So we found a one-to-many relationship. This is, easy kind of thing. If you're a practitioner and recognize this, you make a simple crosswalk and you just work around it. Not so for someone coming in from the outside trying to follow the standards, right? As we went on, remember I thought we were going to have to scan the first 12 fields, whatever, to figure out what sensors were there. Upon further review, we had to scan the first 31 sensor fields. So again, it's not a huge deal. We just had to figure it out and do it. But basically, just a simple process of following what we thought were the standards and the guidance for doing that didn't get us to where we thought we would. And so we had a process built on that. It wouldn't have worked. And if it had broken it, we would not have been able to fix it. So trying to use a really simple methodology here. In the end, we did get exactly what we wanted because we have the ability to work around some of these things. So I know we can get there. And so we were able to come up with a way to automatically parse out the stations. They come up with a master station list for FEMS. We can see if all the sensors are there, tag stations as yes or no, whether they're maintenance compliance. We can do a bunch of scans and stuff, so forth. But basically, I was able to achieve that success myself. We can make the whole system work in my mind if we could change like 6 small synchronous things in the system. But I'm not sure how I would do that because it would involve standards, it would involve a system, it would involve multiple systems. It wouldn't be a simple thing the way our current structure is. So it made me think about that. I'll come back to that. But if I had a way, if it were me, right, I could go in and tweak the knobs, but I'm not in charge of all these, and maybe just go in and pull a couple of server wires, change them around, we're good to go. How do you do that when we have an organization that runs all this, that does standards as in one, system in another, so forth? So I'll get that at the very end. A couple last things I want to hit in terms of big picture. This was talked about. There's some big picture changes that have already come and are coming to fire environment. This point to grid transition has already occurred in the meteorological world, and it is slowly coming on here in fire, at least in fire environment. Very much of our fire environment science and practice is rooted in the collection application, basically, of observational point data. It's just that's still a huge part of what we do. But really point data now is only a small portion of everything that drives all the data we have out of high resolution on the ground. There are no such things as forecasts for RAWs anymore. There's forecasts for the grid boxes the RAWs are in. And bottom line is we need to prioritize understanding and improving the relationship between the data from our point assets and the gridded data that's actually the state of the science being used everywhere. We have a lot of confusion now about this, and this is the way it's going to be. So we need to focus on education, transformation, this whole point to grid thing we're kind of in the middle of, but it is causing some issues right now because, again, folks are kind of used to owning their station data. How do we transition to a situation where it's done at a national level or systematically, and they don't touch that? As Scott had mentioned, some challenges there. Hopefully I don't lose you all on this one. I mentioned this the very first day, and I'm not really sure how to cover this very well, except this is the interface we run into in FEMS and other systems. When you have to stitch together past observations that have requirements that need to be relatively perfect with forecasts that need to be the same. There's always some intermediate space there where the past conditions meet the current observations and forecasts, and things just don't line up in real time in the real world without a massive assimilation system. So again, we don't really have this in fire environment right now that I'm aware of. But really, if you can envision it, all the data comes in, it gets systematically, how can I best describe it? Observational data is coming in. Simulations of both the past and future are used to kind of correct that as it's going. So really the modern day environmental condition is an analysis grid at high resolution, and it is informed by much more information we would ever possibly believe, and it has gotten so much better over the past few decades, it would blow our minds. Huge reason why forecast model accuracy has improved from like 3 days, like 20 years ago, to 7 or 8 days now, is because of this. This is just totally different than the way that we do things in fire. And we're going to have to, in my mind, figure out a way to address assimilation as we continue to use and get better with using fire environment data, because we're going to have to find a way to keep that data robust through this entire lineage here, right, from past, now to future. So Weather Service and other organizations do a really good job of that. It's a lot of high computing power and space to think about, but that's a huge thing. One of the last things, introducing scale. I say introducing because I realize as we've driven drawn polygons over the years, and these are ones I drew on the right. So my predictive services areas and some fire danger rating areas I helped with. I'm not sure we thought a lot about scale, like what size matters for drawing something that you want to detect. If you want to, what's the appropriate size? Well, so I thought about meteorology more. I was like, it may not matter in this general sense as drawing a shape, but if you want to detect or see a certain phenomena, size sure matters. So if the big, it's interesting, is we go on, I think we'll see more of this, but we're going to have to address this in the way we either look at polygons, different resolution and gridded data and so forth. But if you draw a really big area, like some of the PSAs I have, you'll pick up the big, like synoptic scale meteorology changes. That's what they're intended to do. Folks need to understand if you draw smaller and smaller areas or do different things, you're seeing a different thing and missing out. There's always a trade-off on scale. I'm not sure we've talked or thought about that much because we always use point data, which is all the same scale. So again, these are some I think there's some science things and things coming down the line that are going to think foundationally change data for us, and we're just not really exactly sure yet how. So again, I think we need a new way to summarize, relate, understand, and fortify this entire thing. It's kind of the nexus of science, technology, data, and analysis. I don't think the traditional means of doing business, so starting with institutional knowledge and tracking back through, our structure is working right now. And we just need a functional structure and a plan to organize the server room, kind of like my matrix idea. We definitely have to get after understanding and integrating gridded environmental data because it's being used everywhere else right now. And we're having some confusion about it, and it is the future and the now. And the last thing I'll talk about in the last slide is we need to have some kind of authoritative body to address this growing collective of science, these kind of decisions right now. Like, who addresses, if I go and say, I need to change these 6 things next week to make everything work? How can I get that across? It'd be great to have a means for making relatively quick, coordinated, authoritative decisions across the entire fire environment business area space. That's really, really hard to do with the structure we have right now. So as I look ahead, I'll speak to this. One of the things I think we need to focus on, is the foundation of this matrix. So I think if this matrix and the concept is reasonable, I would recommend a systematic assessment starting at the foundation, because we do not want chaos theory or more chaos theory introduced in our system at the root if we can help it. Basically, I think if we're up to me, there's a lot of good stuff going on at the higher levels, right? A lot of good use of high resolution gridded data for other things other than fire environment. We need to kind of meet them there. So I think we need to focus on our foundation of climate, weather, and fire danger and really get the point data systems solidified, locked down, solid, and so forth. So that provides the foundation for everything else. If are going to stay on for the next year or so, this is what I would recommend I go after specifically because it is so foundational. Everything else, whether anybody knows it or not, we have to get that locked down. And one of the ways we might achieve that, and I kind of skipped a slide there, is who's the authority for this? Right now, we don't have a real simple way to move something through. That little process I showed you that I was challenged with might take several committees to work through in 6 to 12 months to get something done that could be done in a week. We've talked at great length, and this is a slide I believe Cheryl Wright put together. Maybe she can help me. There has to be some kind of space below the fire management board and above us that can make cross-cutting decisions that look at all these things, that don't have to go bang around in every single committee just to move to the next step. There just has to be some way we need to sit down with folks who can have decision-making authority in this realm, discuss these kind of things. My idea would be I would take a plan to them to address that same little station problem. Here's my plan for the 6 things I need to change, exactly where, exactly who I'm going to talk to, get some authority from them in an agreement, and then synchronize that activity, and then maybe get it done really in short order. So that's, again, it's a utopian way of thinking about things, but I just think there's a different way than the way we are doing it now. And for fire environment, we have to have this. Again, this is pretty much the end of my presentation, so I'll leave it here. So I think the future of fire environment has a lot to do with our authority to make decisions and to guide people like me and others who are operating in the fire environment business area. Right now, that is a bit confusing. Well, I will leave it at that. It's late afternoon today. I'm already a little bit burnt. I'd love to hear your perspectives on this, any comments, feedback you have. I haven't reached out and talked to enough of you over the time because I've been lost in the server room, but I really want to grab onto your wire here and get going. So love to hear from you. Glad to take any questions or comments.
Hey, Nick, there's Steve put a question in the chat. Did you see that?
Yep, answering now.
Okay. So Chuck, I think, you've made a really, really good case for that fire environment oversight group that we've been trying to get the charter signed through FMB for a bit of time here. But yeah, I think I just want to say thank you. I mean, you've taken some really complex stuff and really been thinking through it. And I think to me, it's the value I've seen in this is that you've brought your business expertise in and then started looking at it through a data lens, and it enriches both the business and the data side, right? Like those partnerships. And I think just how you've been able to come into the data management program is just, man, like I can't imagine what we would do if we had somebody from Fuels doing this. And, like it just brings some interesting opportunities and shows the value of having somebody that can focus and isn't trying to do everything as collateral duty. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Talking to Cheryl and others, I think we could use a few more of me.
Yeah.
But no, I've really enjoyed it to bring that operational and kind of product perspective you have to be able to see things to work with them. So I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone's patience.